Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Peter Whittle. Now this week it's been an historic week in America, and so I'm delighted and indeed honoured to have a very distinguished conservative figure speaking to us. Dr. Larry Arnn is the president of Hillsdale College, and he's author as well of a number of books of political history and indeed specialises in our very own Winston Churchill, and it's a very respected conservative academic. Excuse that rather gauche build-up there, Larry. But I should explain probably to our viewers as well that I'm talking to you, it would be in Michigan there around about 9 o'clock, I think, in the morning. Yes. And obviously we're recording this straight after what has been quite an extraordinary night. What is your... what is the atmosphere like there? How are you feeling about it?
Well, we live in a very divided country, and so my half is really happy. It's not half and half. The real truth is, I think, by the way, this might have been true in the British election, which probably you were not as happy with as I am with this one, but. There's a bunch of people, and they're important people and prominent people and powerful people, and they think the government should run everything. And they have been getting their way increasingly. And if you just look at the facts, the American government is revolutionized. If this movement that everything is evolution and everything is progress and everything should be governed by what they call science, which is not really science. That became institutionalized in America in the 1932 election, the first time believers of those things won all the popular branches of government. Compare the government today with 1930. In a liberal society, the kind where people like us get to read great books if we want to and don't have to if we don't, there's supposed to be a private sphere, and that means that the relationship between the government and the people is sensitive. How big is the government? How big are the people? Well, in 1930, at all levels, government in the United States consumed about 12% of the gross domestic product. Now it's 51%.
Right.
In 1930, over 60% of the money that was raised and spent in government was raised and spent in cities and counties and towns. Now that number is 18%, and the federal government is over 60%. So you see, we have conscripted a significant part of the national treasure and national annual income into the government, and we have located it in the place in the government that's farthest away from the people. Yeah. So that thing, right, and if you follow the Federalist Papers, let's say in America, the most wonderful thing ever written about our Constitution, they say that it's not a matter of left and right. They say that men are not angels and angels do not govern men. And they say that then if men have unaccountable power, sooner or later they will abuse it. Well, the accountability has been breaking down. And this election, maybe it got restored somewhat. And I hope that that movement will go on from strength to strength.
Are you surprised by the scale of this particular victory for Trump?
Well, we have to remember there are two reasons why I'm not. One is I have a colleague here, Doug Jeffrey is a very long-serving colleague with me, and he's a very pessimistic man, and this year he's been optimistic. So I think, okay, maybe everything's going to be great.
Obviously, the coverage of American politics generally, actually here, has just grown and grown and grown. And last night, I mean, it was absolutely wall to wall. And people are looking at parallels, and there are unquestionably parallels. But it does seem, I wonder what you feel about this characterization that, along with what you just told me, it does appear to be a kind of revolt against, the elites in many respects. I mean, whether it's his media elites or whether it's government elites. Would you say that that is a correct analysis?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, here's an interesting thing. First of all, remember that the election was pretty narrow, right? Trump won the popular vote, it looks like, and he won the electoral vote, we call it, by a lot. And his support is very widely distributed.
Right.
Left-wing support is concentrated in the cities, and especially in the academic towns, this one accepted. So it was, it's a close election, very. And they are like that these days here. Yeah. Now, the breadth of it is, as you rightly say, remarkable, because he just won all over the place, outside the cities, every state, everywhere. The other thing is, he got, they're saying this morning, 45% of the Hispanic vote.
Wow.
And, Trump is, I know him a little bit, and I've been for him since 2016, which is a very odd thing for a college president to do, as these things go. And I will say, I didn't like him as a public figure before, but I gave a speech somewhere once where he gave a speech in 2015, I think it was. And he just radically upstaged me.
Right.
And I enjoyed it. Wow. My wife said I was supposed to be the keynote speaker. And there were 1,800 people at this event. Yeah. And it was a big event, right? And I'm supposed to be pretty good. Well, he sweeps in, and he was supposed to talk for 18 minutes or something. And he talked for 55. And when it came my turn, I was supposed to be the climax, I guess. I talked for 5 because everybody was exhausted, and I didn't mind. And my wife leaned over to me, who's a British subject, by the way, and she said, "Larry, this is outrageous." And I said, "Look around, dear one. This is pretty good." and I started taking him seriously, and
Yes.
And he's a revolutionary force.
Yeah.
And remember, see, this is not a Republican or a Democrat thing. This goes back to understanding Aristotle's politics, right? If wealth and influence are concentrated in a class of people, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
And we have that now, right? And then it's just notorious that people get conscripted into it. Of both parties, right? And Trump is extremely stubborn human being, and he is not conscripted into it. And so it's a very dramatic thing. I would say that it's, I'm an old man now, and so I remember I knew Ronald Reagan. I knew Margaret Thatcher. I knew her pretty well. Oh, yeah, and I knew Ronald Reagan, too, because I worked on the Churchill biography, and
Yes.
and you end up meeting famous people if you do that. And I knew both of them fairly well. And Reagan, I always thought, was the greatest politician I ever saw. I think Trump is like that. I think he's different, in many ways very different, but I think that they mean the same thing, and in broad strokes.
Yeah.
And, they don't, I have lots of friends who don't like Donald Trump, and many more who have reservations about him, and I have some reservations about him. I think a fellow ought not to be cheating on his wife and stuff like that. And be good if he cleaned his language up. But I also think he's a great man. I think he's very courageous. I think he's very far-seeing. And I think this idea that the country belongs to the governed, to the people who live in it, and they should control it. I think that's what's at risk now, and I think he's doing more to restore that than any politician in 40 years, 50 years.
You mentioned there that you knew Margaret Thatcher. I see a sort of parallel, actually, Larry, in the sense that although she was a conservative, she was sort of in an odd way not of the Conservative Party. And that's almost how I sort of view Trump, in a way, that they're quite distinct from their context.
I came, so she was a very, so I moved to England, my first trip abroad in my life, in August of 1977, and ended up working for Martin Gilbert.
Martin Gilbert.
Sir Martin Gilbert. Yeah,
yes, he wrote the book on Churchill, yes.
And, he became a friend of mine and a colleague of mine until he died in 2015. Yeah. But 2 weeks later, he hired my wife. And this is when Margaret Thatcher is coming to power.
Right. Yes.
And it was just the best political theater I'd ever watched.
Yeah.
I remember her debating James Callaghan, and I know something about him that few do. He was one of the leading people as a young MP who would bait Winston Churchill when Churchill was in his second premiership.
Really?
And there, you can go look at the Hansard and you can find it, and it's often delightful exchanges. They were both pretty good.
Yes.
And so he honed his knife against Winston Churchill, and now he's arguing with Margaret Thatcher. And she got better and better. Yeah. And then my wife and I got married while I was over there, and my wife and I moved back to America in August of 1980, and then Reagan was elected president in November. And Reagan would say to me, "You should move more often. You seem to have good political effects when you go to a place." and I said to him one time, I said, "Yeah, Mr. President, you're the greatest politician I've ever met." I said, "But you've always seemed a little soft to me." And he said, "Soft?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "I was living in England when Mrs. Thatcher rose to power." And he said, "That's hardly a fair comparison." and I later told her that story. And she just scolded me good for casting any aspersion on Ronnie, as she called him. I never called him that. But anyway, she said, no, you must not speak to Ronnie that way. She was very, she was
yes.
something else. And so I adored them, both of them. And, I know well a Supreme Court justice over here named Clarence Thomas, and I've always regarded him as a very great man.
Yes.
And I'm putting Trump up there with those three. I think, we'll see what happens. I also think J.D. Vance is very promising.
Yes.
So, and these are all crazy things to say, and they'll get me in all kinds of hot water because you're not supposed to, like I'll be disqualified from being, from being fit to be around young people. Because,
You're quite safe here.
because I've said these things, But the truth is, a college is not everybody here agrees with me about that, of course, nor do they need to. There are good reasons. Donald. Here's the thing about Trump. I have many friends who are free traders, and Winston Churchill was a free trader. In British politics, that argument, that issue, is extremely consequential because in the 19th century, when they changed the tariff regime was benefiting an aristocracy that had special privileges of power by birth. And that means people were paying more for their bread, so the ruling class could have more.
Yeah.
And Winston Churchill's father and Benjamin Disraeli and Winston Churchill himself were very against that. Well, that means that it was as an economic issue, it's not very hard to understand. If you believe in the division of labor, let's say you do what you do and I do what I do, and we get good at it and then we trade, then a global division of labor is better, right? Because then you can have everybody competing.
Yep.
Of course I believe that. Everybody does. Now, it gets complicated, though, see, because the issue doesn't work the same way in this country as it did in the past there in Britain. We've never had a House of Lords, right? There's never been a title, because you're well-born, to rule another person. And that means that the political part of the issue, who gets to rule, that's what politics is about, and in virtue of what principle. It works different over here. And then, so I've been fond of saying for my adult life, Winston Churchill was a free trader, and Abraham Lincoln and Alexander Hamilton and George Washington and James Madison were protectionists. The natural law does not speak to me on this question. I do recognize that the global division of labor expressed in free trade is the most economically efficient. But that argument proves a little too much, because right now in America, we seem to have some advantage against the Chinese, who have a bigger navy than we have now and are building much faster than we are. We have an advantage in submarines. And I'm told that we have a budget to build 3 nuclear submarines a year, but we in fact build only 2 because we have to wait on parts from China. And is that smart?
Yes, it's ridiculous.
So the point is, the principle of free trade is, like all principles, dependent on circumstances too. Doesn't mean it's not true. It means it doesn't fit all cases. So so anyway, and so that's a thing about Trump. I find it interesting and delightful that my wife, Penny is her name, a wonderful woman, 45 years now.
Congratulations.
She reads the Daily Telegraph still, all the time.
Yeah.
And she's got me reading it too. And I used to know Peter Utley, who was the deputy editor of the Telegraph and a famous newspaper guy and a charming character, tremendous man. And so I'm fond of that paper. And it was fun to read it this morning, because one of the articles is about your prime minister sending 100 people over here to
That's right.
campaign for Kamala Harris. And is that going to cause him any trouble? Well, I think it ought to, but I hope not, because what could be better than to have a bilateral trade agreement between the United States and Great Britain that's very generous to both?
I think the problem is, problem really in some ways, Larry, is that obviously we've got this new government, as you say. We have a Home Secretary who's a little bit of a national embarrassment, who is sort of on record on X, as it used to be Twitter, calling Trump, a Nazi and this and that and the other. And this sort of thing, almost childlike, sixth form childlike politics, really. And frankly, he's now got, our Foreign Secretary, for what it's worth, has now got to have dealings, with the new administration. But it gives you an idea of the general quality of what we're talking about in this government, which is low, is very, very low caliber.
Yeah, Trump, we do, in the politics of the day, and see, if you know some history, politics are often virulent. Nothing that's happening right now in America is unprecedented, but it is very serious. It is seldom precedented. I think that the stakes in politics today are that, and see, as you can see, I'm flexible about lots of things in politics. I'm not a doctrinaire policy issue guy in very many cases. But this idea that you arrange the powers under a constitution so that people can control their government and not use it against each other. That's the genius of the American Constitution, and in a different way of the British Constitution. And I think that is threatened in our time, in both places, by the way, and for a similar reason. It's true of our Congress, as it's true of your Parliament, that it does not really make the laws anymore.
Yes.
And that's one reason why there can be so many laws, because our Congress and your Parliament are the same awkward, argumentative, ponderous thing that they've always been. And they can only make so many laws. But if you delegate the making of the laws to a bureaucracy, they can make plenty. And that's a revolution in free government in the modern world. And I think it's a dangerous one. If you read Locke's second treatise on government, which was influential in Britain, Locke was a British man, and in America, one of the things he warns against is the delegation of the legislative power. And we've done that, and I think, by the way, that's one of the reasons why politicians tend to look somewhat ridiculous.
Yes.
Because are they really doing the most serious work anymore? Or have they delegated that out to somebody else who is nameless and unaccountable?
Yeah.
So, I can tell you about Winston Churchill, as I love to say. Winston Churchill was a very great man. And he was a lifelong advocate of having bicameralism. He did help to destroy the power of the House of Lords to interfere with the law passed by the Commons. But he called for, at that time and ever after, that the House of Lords should be reconstituted with an indirect accountability to the people.
Yep.
Because you need two, so you have deliberation in government. He was for federalism. He wanted to get little questions, any local questions. He wanted to get it out of the House of Commons in London. He wanted regional parliaments. He wanted to devolve the government because he wanted the House of Commons, and he was, of course, very good in the House of Commons. He's one of the greatest ever. And it was his home. It's the reason he turned down a dukedom. And he cultivated speaking there all his life, starting when he was 23 years old in India. He wanted that to be the place where the high questions are thought through, the questions that affect our purpose in life and our freedom and the civilization we're part of and to protect. And so that, you see, that's not what it is anymore. What it is now is technical talk that's part of a host of technical talk that nobody follows, really, except particular people who are interested in each issue. Like, there's an agency in the American government, in the Department of Education, focused on higher education, which is what I do for a living. And because I do it for a living and have done for a long time, I think I understand how it works.
Yes.
And I don't think the people in that department do understand how it works. Because when they make a rule, it always seems to me off the point or counter the point. Very often just counter the point, just ignorant of the thing. It doesn't work like that, right? And they don't do it, they just make rules about it.
Yes.
And that's not a good institution, in my opinion.
Well, it's so much of, as you say here, so much of the law now is sort of unaccountable, what we call quangos, sort of a quangocracy, which seems to be, it cannot seem to be abolished. All governments come in saying, we're going to get rid of this quangocracy, which basically takes away from sovereignty of Parliament, and they never do, and it just simply gets bigger and bigger. You mentioned there, actually, Larry, about your career in higher education. I mean, for a lot of our audience watching, very interested obviously in, particularly in the cultural side of politics, but I wonder whether you could just explain to us the significance of Hillsdale, which you've been president of now for, is it 24 years, I believe?
Yeah.
You know, it has a particular position, doesn't it, on the American higher education landscape?
Yeah, well, so Hillsdale College is 180 years old. It was founded in 1844. A bunch of, they were abolitionists. We were very important in the Civil War. We helped to write the platform that Abraham Lincoln was elected president on, and we had more boys than anybody except Yale and West Point fight for the Union Army in the Civil War. So we were abolitionists, we were Christians. You had to know Greek and Latin to enter the college. And we were constitutionalists. And so that's how they started it. And then it had an early history that was full of glory. And then, its middle history is somewhat more ordinary. But in about 1960, the federal government started giving money to colleges, and we refused it. It's before my time. My two predecessors both did that. And they had an instinct, really. It's amusing to read the debates in the college records about what does this mean and should we do it, and all that stuff is settled wisdom around here now. But in the beginning, they were just confused by it. What does it mean that this is going to happen? Because we turned that money down, and because the amount of the money and the regulations accompanying the money have basically taken over higher education in America. Mm. And there were many colleges at the beginning that refused the money, but one by one, all but about 4 or 5 of them have now joined the regime. Mm. And we have not. And we had I like to say we had a stubborn quality in 1844, and we seem to have it in 2024. Yeah. And that means that we publish a lot, and the purposes of the college are freedom, faith, learning, and character. There's a beautiful document written in 1844 that I happened to read, which is what changed my mind about the insipidity of ever being a college president. Right. It's, on the face of it, it's the dumbest job in the world. But I thought, I liked that document, and I thought, Aristotle writes, well begun is half done. Maybe we could just run it out of that. And that's what we do.
But it's a beacon, really, on the landscape, Larry, in the sense that obviously what we see a lot here, and here in Britain too, but is a shocking decline across higher education. In our colleges, no longer a sense of exploration of ideas, or in even the most menial free speech, actually. And that is, by keeping to what you do, that is not something that obviously has affected Hillsdale. I mean, would it be correct to say, a lot of people here immediately talk about you when they say, oh, well, there are conservative institutions, and Hillsdale is one,
Yeah.
Whereas in the UK, we have one private university called the University of Buckingham, but basically we've had this huge expansion of low caliber higher education, and very politically motivated.
And see, there's a thing about that. It's a big theme, but I'll try to state it. What we call in America progressivism is the same thing that came into Britain, or a very related thing that came into Britain under the movement of Fabianism. Yes. And it's connected to German historicism, right? Mm. And the point of that line of thought is that we can produce a new kind of society. We can take over nature itself. And that kind of government tends to use people as tools. And so now we think of college as an engineering project, as making something. We are going to make the students into something. This is my line of work, and I can tell you, they don't like that. In fact, it's stupid to even try. Because if they're the kind that are willing to submit to that, they're not really the kind to be of much interest. And
I think actually, I have a quote from you here from a recent interview you did about colleges, and you said in it, if I'm correct, you have to be able to surrender your opinion in order to learn.
Yeah, that's right. And you can't, and that's the teacher too, right? Yeah. In other words, one of the things that's beautiful about classical philosophy, but Plato and Aristotle and Cicero and all them, is that they were attempting to move from opinion to knowledge. And they thought that was a hard journey. And they had to build all the qualities in themselves to do it. That's what college is for. And that's why, by the way, we have a speech rule here. Free speech absolutist, they call themselves, criticize us for this. But the speech rule is you can say what you want if you can say it in a civil and academic manner. In other words, we're here to, talk to each other. And there's no use trying to enforce an opinion on a 19-year-old, because they're changing them every day, and they should, right? They get better when one hopes, and so that means that you need to have a spirit of discussion, but you can't control where it goes, and you shouldn't try. You can control the subject matter through the curriculum. That is to say, if you get a call, I invite you and all your listeners to come visit Hillsdale College. It's a lot of fun. And my favorite sport is to eat in the dining hall with the students. And I teach every term. And I just have a ball with the students. They're fun. And they argue all the time, and they're friendly all the time, and they're questing all the time. And if you don't enjoy watching 18-year-olds grow up, you don't have much adventure in you. And and college is supposed to be like that, right? It's supposed to be fun, and it's supposed to be hard. And I will say that the single most important thing, in our experience here at Hillsdale College, we've done pretty well in recent years, and better than we did in previous years. And why do we think we did that? We found ways to turn everybody into a volunteer.
Right.
College learning is not something that A can do for B. B may very well need A, and A can help. But the minute that B is not working really hard, B is not learning. And so we came to see that, and you have to sign an honor code to get admitted to our student body. It's hard to get in here. We have a big backlog. And if you want a faculty job here, you have to write a statement about the meaning of the original document of the college. And you can write whatever you want to, but we're going to read it. And so the point is, everybody here agrees that we are going to seek these ends by these means together. And that means I don't have to make anybody do anything. And I don't even believe in doing that.
All right. What would you say? This is a very big question, I suppose. But what would you say? Because here it is a huge problem. People saying we've got to build our own institutions. We've got to get ourselves out of the stranglehold of government control and the control of what they call here the blob, i.e., meaning civil service, elite college. How should people go about it? How would they? I mean, obviously, Hillsdale is an extraordinarily distinguished college. It's been there for, as you said, 200 years now.
180,
if you wanted to start an institution, how would people go about it? If you say, I want to start something like Hillsdale in the UK.
Well, I believe in proceeding from the bottom up.
Yep.
In fact, I think what's wrong with the government today is that we forget that the virtue of courage and all the virtues are in people. And they're not in there because we put them in there. They're in there because God put them in there and they developed them in themselves. So the point is, the first thing is, you're doing it right now. You have a community of people who are talking about things, asking that question, and also paying some attention to eternal subjects and the best things written about them. That's a college.
Yeah.
I think we have a law here in America. I think after our election we may get more such laws. And the basic thing is, in America, if you want to start a primary or secondary school, K through 12, we call it here.
Yep.
You can do it, and the tax money that goes to the public schools could come to you.
Yeah.
Something like that. The word academic comes from the name of a general who gave a field to Plato so he could have his classes outside. Academicos was his name. And it starts with that. Some people talking and reading and learning together.
Yes.
And then step by step you think what you need. And, Hillsdale College has, I've been here a long time, as you mentioned, and it's grown a lot. And I sort of look around at it sometimes and say, wow, this got out of hand, didn't it? But, it's what happened here? But it does start with getting a few things right.
Yes.
And then I would, because I believe that the key to the political situation in the Western countries is decentralize.
Yes.
We should return power back to individual people and the levels of government closest to them. One of my favorite things to say is the proper sovereign in education is the school where teachers and students and parents are gathered and they know each other and love the child. So I would favor a law that would decentralize that.
Yes.
I would. That's a great place to start. And then what happens is, because Hillsdale College we sponsor charter schools, they're called in America, which are such schools.
Yes.
Somebody gets together and starts a school, and we help them do that. And it's over 100 schools now.
Really?
And we don't take any money from the government, but that means they don't give us any money, and that means whatever we do for them, which is several $1 million a year now, we pay for.
Right.
But there's 20,000 students going to those schools, something like that.
And how many students are there actually at Hillsdale itself now?
About 1,650.
Right. Okay.
As I like to say, unless somebody's naughty, and I have to shoot somebody this afternoon. And you see, now these schools, they become learning communities. See, who's that woman? I'm going to get her name wrong. There's a woman that my wife has put,
Birbal Singh, Catherine Birbal Singh. It's called Millennia College, which is here in London, and she gets vilified, Larry, for her huge success. With these kids.
Yeah.
Vilified.
So in other words, if you want to be free, you have to permit people to live their lives.
Yeah.
And that woman, I'm in this line of work myself, right? And I've watched a couple of videos of that woman, and I think that woman knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
Because it's what you do. Education is not something you do to someone. And in America, I don't know the numbers in Britain, but in America, more than half the employees of public education are not teachers. And that means you have a larger group telling a smaller group what to do.
Yeah.
And it's the smaller group that actually has to do it. And there's no need for that. And I'll bet you if you look at her schools, those numbers are very different, dominated by teachers. They are in our schools in America.
Yeah.
And so you need to liberate, right? And then here's a really great thing. People get this habit of mind, right? My wife's father and grandfather fought in the First and Second World Wars for the Lancashire Gunners. They both had really hard wars. And they're lawyers from Preston in the north. Law firm that was founded in the year of the American Revolution and still there in Preston. They turned out to be very brave soldiers. They were not trained for it, except the way they lived their lives.
Yes.
And
The way they lived their lives, yes.
And that means the strength of Britain is in the activity of a free people learning and working and caring for their own, which what equips them to care for the nation.
Yes.
I mean, you know, the sorest trial in the history of Britain, which Churchill always called the unnecessary war, a failure of the ruling class, he thought. The sorest trial was Little Britain up against a mass organized, top-down regime, which attempted to rule everything in everyone's life. And Little Britain, you know, hardly organized at all compared to that, proved incredibly resilient against those people.
Yes. Yeah.
You see? In other words, freedom is good for people, and they will become more productive and more learned, and above all, more happy if they are allowed to have it. And instead, what we try to do is manage everything, including, as you mentioned before, the dumbest thing in the world, which is to try to control what people say.
Yeah.
Right? Because it will lead you to try to control what they think. And then you have totalitarianism. And you'll never get that done, you see. And so the point is, we should, if we love each other, if we love beauty, if we love higher things, we should liberate people to pursue them.
Yes.
And start small. I mean, you've got a new Tory leader over there, and I can't remember her name. Kimmy, is that her name?
So Kemi Badenoch, yes.
Yeah. Well, my wife approves of her, and therefore I do. Therefore I do. And that's all I know about her. And but she should put in the Tory platform something about education reform that will permit people to just start schools.
Yes.
And then leave them alone. Like, here's one of my very favorite things to say. Anybody who asks the question, I would like to read the 30 greatest books in history, I'm going to find out what they are. Anybody who asks themselves that question that way, they won't all get the same answer, but the books they get will be overwhelmingly very great books. You can figure it out, you know.
Yeah.
We're made to know. The first line of Aristotle's Metaphysics is, the human being stretches himself out to know.
Yeah.
And if you look at that school of Mrs. Burblesing, is that her name?
Yeah.
But the kids are excited by nature, right? It's not something she did. They just want to know. And so you get a classroom full of people trying to learn, it's bound to be exciting. This idea that we engineer that from above is crazy.
Well, exactly. I mean, we do have an example ourselves here at the New Cultures Forum of helping a school which was started by a married couple. Now, it's so small, I think it's got about 30 pupils, called the King Alfred School. And it's basically the whole point of it is to base all their teachings on great English and British traditions, whether it be religious, constitutional, and they've started and they just have to try piece by piece to raise money for it. But it's that kind of, they weren't teachers before and they have started something. So I think what you say is absolutely right and very inspiring, I think. It's wonderful to talk to you about this. I'm very, very grateful for your time on this. We just have if I will sign off now, but we do have just a little one question or so for what we call our exclusive members, that we just give them a loan. So
Okay.
For the time being, if you could just hang on there, for the time being, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Yep. That was Dr. Larry Arnn from Hillsdale College. Thank you very much for joining us this week. We shall be back next week. In the meantime, have a happy and safe time, won't you? Take care. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.